My top 10 waiver wire ads for week 3, but I'm going to switch things up this week, guys. I'm going to start things off with the guys that are new to my list and then cover the guys that we talked about last week who are still available on waivers if you weren't convinced they were worth the ad, and you can add now that we know for sure that you need to grab them. Troy Franklin, have yourself a day. The Colts defense clamped down on Courtland Sutton early, and Bo Nix turned to Troy Franklin, who had 8 receptions on 9 targets for 89 yards and a touchdown. Franklin had a solid week 1, catching 4 of his 6 targets for 44 yards. The real key here for Franklin is that we saw a dramatic increase in snaps in week 2. So more than likely, Sean Payton is rewarding him for a solid week 1 outing. Franklin played the most snaps of any Broncos receiver and ran the most routes. We talked about this last week regarding why I like Juwan Johnson so much as a waiver wire ad, because the snaps and routes do not lie. While we shouldn't raise him to a must-start territory, this is an excellent sign that Franklin is close to locking down that wide receiver 2 role in a very solid Denver offense that bounced back very well this week. Elic Ayomanor is the clear wide receiver 2 in this offense, and the only thing that held him back from being on my waiver wire list last week was that I wasn't sure just how much we could rely on Cam Ward to provide consistent volume enough to support a fantasy relevant wide receiver 2, this early in the season at least. While we would still like to see more volume, it was another tough matchup, and if the target share is going to be hyper-focused on Ridley and Ayomanor, he can have fantasy value. Ayomanor had 4 receptions for 56 yards and his first career touchdown. He is definitely one to stash and see how this Titans offense continues to develop. I know you don't want to do it, but Russell Wilson clearly likes Wan'Dale Robinson, and Brian Daboll is actually varying Robinson's usage a lot. Robinson's ADOT was 5.1 in 2024 this year. Massive difference. He is at 10.7. It's a small sample size, but it is significant. When you tie in multiple deep receptions, it is very clear that they are trying to use him in a more varied way. And that actually does make a lot of sense, considering that they phased out Jalen Hyatt, who was serving as a deep threat in the offense. The Giants have a matchup against Kansas City defense this week that is tough against the run and theoretically softer against the pass. Robinson is operating as the clear wide receiver 2 for a team that has to push volume through the air. If he's got volume plus yardage and touchdown opportunities, this actually might finally be legit. Whereas other backup running backs who had strong week 1 performances fell back to the wayside in week 2, looking at you, Zach Charbonnet, Kenneth Gainwell actually retained the exact role that he had in week 1, and 3 things are very clear here. 1, Jaylen Warren is definitely the lead back here. 2, Kenneth Gainwell has clear standalone value, getting roughly 40 to 50%-ish of snaps in each game and has the added value of receiving work. And then 3, this one is kind of sad here, Caleb Johnson is falling as aggressively out of favor as you can possibly fall in a very short period of time. Johnson is non-existent in the offense and had one of the worst mistakes that you can possibly make, failing to field the ball on a kickoff leading to a Seattle touchdown. Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith are very similar in one way. They require you to earn trust, and they do not acquiesce on that once you have lost it. Gainwell doesn't have massive upside, but he is a very reliable back. He is the direct handcuff to Jaylen Warren, and he offers standalone value. Jayden Reed is out for the next couple of months, and Romeo Doubs is back on the table. Doubs never really had a massive ceiling, and the guy with the most upside is probably just Tucker Kraft. But Reed's injury is on a very, very clear timeline here, and Doubs is a guy that you can plug into your fantasy lineup for a minimum of 10 points on a weekly basis. I can admit I really thought that we would see a bigger impact here from Matthew Golden earlier. And to be fair, it's not as if he is iced out of the offense or performing poorly. He's on the field. He's getting targets. He's just had bad lucks in terms of off-target throws, and Green Bay still operating as a wide receiver by committee. Doubs has the safer floor from a fantasy perspective and is the guy that you should target from the Green Bay receiving core in terms of guys that will actually benefit from Jayden Reed's absence. I would still hold on to Matthew Golden if you roster him. This is not a bailout scenario here. This is just an additional ad that is available on waivers. Bhayshul Tuten is a guy that is kind of on the gray area in terms of roster percentage. I like to keep this video to guys listed below 50% in all leagues. Now, I wanted to include him for those who play in shallow leagues here because he might still be available. With Tank Bigsby shipped off to Philadelphia, we wondered what this Jags backfield would look like, and we got an answer real quick here. Travis Etienne is still the clear RB1. He had a solid day. This does not look like a situation where Etienne is just losing his job outright. But we knew that the Jags wanted to use multiple backs, and Bhayshul Tuten is clearly that dude that they want to use along with him. Now, be aware, the snaps, again, they still favor Etienne by a pretty significant margin, but Tuten looked fantastic, and he was very productive with his snaps. Now, I will also say this was a very soft matchup against Cincinnati. The road ahead is Houston, San Francisco, Kansas City. Those are all more difficult matchups against the run, but Tuten showed very well in his first game with a clear standalone role. On to guys that were on the waiver wire list last week. I told you to prioritize Juwan Johnson over Harold Fannin Jr. If you didn't, it's cool. He's still widely available in leagues. If you were skeptical about the usage, relax, because it is very clear Kellen Moore wants him to have a consistent role in the Saints offense. An offense that continues to push aggressive pass volume. Last week, Johnson had a whopping 8 receptions on 11 targets for 76 yards, and he was the most productive player on the entire Saints offense. He played the most snaps, ran the most routes of any player. This week, 4 receptions, 9 targets, 49 yards, and a touchdown, and was second only to Chris Olave in snaps and routes. He is for real, okay? I got a lot of comments last week around the skepticism because he's had strong games before that ultimately amounted to nothing, but this is a new regime, guys. This is a new regime, a Kellen Moore system that wants to push aggressive pass volume. There is no Taysom Hill. There are no other tight ends contributing. It is Johnson's time to shine. Daniel Jones didn't crack the top 12 in QB finishes this week, but he had an excellent day against a tough Broncos defense. As crazy as it sounds, Daniel Jones is for real. Quarterbacks are starting to dwindle with Brock Purdy out, Jaden Daniels getting an MRI, now Joe Burrow. Jones is the premium streaming option here. Jones had 3 total touchdowns in week 1, 2 of which were on the ground. His upside on the ground is so extreme that he legitimately does have a top 5 ceiling when he is the starter. I know that sounds crazy, but that is the reality of rushing upside. Jones also has a fairly friendly overall schedule. While job security is always a concern, the Colts surrounding cast is strong, and Jones is well positioned to thrive on a weekly basis. I still believe Kayshon Boutte is ascending to the wide receiver 1 of this offense. If you watched my DFS video, I kind of hinted at this. While I loved Drake May in week 2 as a strong start, I wasn't really feeling any of the receivers. The projections were just weird, and that is what happened. No pass catcher hit double-digit fantasy points this week. Ramondre Stevenson led the way in receiving yards. Stephon Diggs did have the highest target share of the receivers, but it amounted to nothing. When you look at the snaps, Kayshon Boutte had 43 snaps compared to just 31 for Stephon Diggs and 15 for Demario Douglas. Diggs is still relevant, but Douglas, he's an afterthought here. Boutte had just 1 target, but it was a touchdown here. Higher volume days are on the horizon, and this is a guy that you want to take a chance on. For every bit of competent that Joe Flacco looked in week 1 against Cincinnati, it was literally the opposite in week 2. It was just a friendly reminder that Cleveland's offense is the definition of instability. But Tillman continues to draw fairly even with Jerry Jeudy in targets. He lucked into a touchdown this week. You could do a lot worse. Snaps, targets, routes run, it is very clear. This is a 1A, 1B with Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman, and I am not entirely convinced that Jeudy is actually the 1A here. Now, the good news is that Cleveland still continued to chuck the ball, and they should continue to do so because they are a bad team, and they will be playing from behind. The next several games are ugly. Green Bay, Detroit, and Minnesota. But again, Tillman might legitimately be the wide receiver 1 of this offense. He is worth a roster spot. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel for more content like this all season long. Waiver wires, DFS, start sits, live Q&A, and more.